I'm happy to introduce this panel on more the legal, regulatory, governance and economics elements when it comes to decentralized energy markets and more generally, decentralization, as we saw the conversation was going in many different directions earlier on. So thanks again for being here. I will quickly introduce you. So we have Matthias from Swiss Economics and senior economists from Crypto Economics and Crypto. And then we have two tax advisors, basically, which are specialized in Web3. So Stéphanie with her home company and Alex from Vectra Advisors. And so feel free to add a bit more on yourself if you need to. And happy to start, breaking the ice, asking you from a policy, legal, or the elements you're working on, what do you believe are the elements that are hindering the development of decentralized energy markets?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Just to give a broad picture also what I'm doing. So we are economists basically, and we support on the one hand protocols, but also applications, decentralized applications and governments when they have questions about economics. Yes. So coming back to your question, basically, what are problems or issues that we face at the moment for decentralized energy? I think one, particularly from my point of view, these are 2 points which I think is very important. So on one hand is education, so what we've seen in past projects, and basically there is a lot of mix about what is technology, what is cryptocurrency, which technology has which kind of energy usage. All these kind of questions I think is very important, what we see in the discussion so far, which also hinders the discussion in policy and regulation about how to have a good framework basically. On the one hand this, and on the other hand I think the infrastructure on the financial side, so I think it's missing, or with many other, not only energy but also in different fields, what we have is basically 2 worlds. We have the crypto world, or the blockchain world, we have the traditional world, and as long as these 2 are not very well connected, it's difficult for use cases to fully use the potential of the blockchain technology.
And from this perspective, how do you think you're somehow able to take away, the fear and have companies start, experimenting on these elements and maybe individually, maybe with us more proof of concept? How do you see that could work? Take away the fear and start doing something.
As said for education, I think we need to talk on the one hand, researchers need to provide information on the blockchain technology. On the other hand, also governments need to understand, and policymakers. We need association, as we have here, to provide information about the blockchain and the different aspects of blockchain technology. And I think this from my point, this is important.
What about from your perspective, Stéphanie?
Yes, I think from a tax perspective, the word decentralization already says a lot, right? I mean, we're talking about decentralization, we're talking about cross-border structures, cross-border business. And the point is, taxes are still very centralized in the meaning of they're bound to countries, and countries need taxes, right? And we see that developments that are still hindering is really this international perspective. We saw it already before, and we were talking about this minimum taxation. Actually, at an event, we were talking to someone from the OECD, and we asked him, hey, what could we do that this could actually work? And told us, yes, we would need a global understanding, actually, how to apply it. And then when we asked him, how do you see it that this will be working? And he told us, yeah, well, not while he is still alive. So I see And that's a topic where we're not talking about technology and decentralization. I think that's one point, and we've discussed it yesterday. What I see and what I feel is that countries feel that they are losing taxes. Because we are getting more mobile, we are getting more decentral. Yes, you're laughing, Alex, because you know it as well. Because we see it in the discussions with the different countries. And then we also see it in the double tax treaties that we have higher taxes actually in the countries when we talk about dividends and interest and so on. And it's probably usually when you do not work with double tax treaties, you don't really see it, but it's important to understand that we see that the rates are getting higher. And at the same time, just for you to know that there is a power struggle going on between the OECD and the UN. And this means when these two do not align, this can really result in a bit of a chaos on international tax level. And when we are talking about decentralization, especially in the energy sector, it is really important that we find an international dialogue and understanding on taxation, that we don't run into double taxation or triple taxations.
Yeah, interesting. And I mean, connecting to what we were discussing yesterday, I was wondering whether you believe somehow taxation is going to change in the future, also from the perspective, okay, maybe not just taxing the individuals and just individuals and companies, but maybe as there is this discussion about robot taxation, agent taxation, that's another potential element. Or is there such a thing, as decentralized taxation? I don't know. Just happy to hear your view on this.
This is exactly the point we have on. It has started, I say. It has started that we are discussing robo tax, meaning you see, we are creating value with these agents. And the more autonomous they are, the more we need to ask the question, okay, who is actually now creating value? And then the question follows, where is it actually created? And there it becomes interesting, and who would then actually be the subject to be taxed? I think this is a discourse that has started on academic level, and I think it's very interesting, and I think we'll be talking about it later, but just to think about it, when we talk about agents, robots, decentralization, we also talk about data, and data has a value. And in the end, value should be taxed, and I guess the development from a tax perspective should be more and more to tax value and to follow that route and break up our old structures of, localizing persons and infrastructure.
And what's your view on this, Alex, or few experiences from your perspective?
Well, first of all, I agree with what's been said by the co-panelists. Second, just a small remark. It's interesting to have a legal panel after Lily before heavily criticized the people with JDs for overcomplicating things, and right away we're just confirming it. Yes, very complicated. But in the energy sector, I would say 2 points, and those are important. Point one, and that was now mentioned, right? Policy, education, policy making, why every L1, and I guess the reason why I'm here today is just because we do actually quite some policy work for the L1s. I mean, not that long time ago, we were with the head of policy of Solana, we were organizing a policy event in Paris, and so on. So that's what the blockchain industry, or L1s at least, serious institutions have checked. You need to talk to the policymakers. You need to educate them, that's how you get more or less some progress on, you have at least hope that some meaningful legislation will appear at some point. That's one. Why all those reputable institutions, all those L1s, Solana, Near Foundation, Ethereum, why they investing into that, why they have heads of policy, why there's entire departments running this. That's because the industry wants it. You have user cases that they need it right here. They need some regulations or deregulation. you call it what you want, but they want to know, if we do staking, are we going to prison tomorrow or not, right? Like, it would be helpful to know. So like there is like a real need from the industry for like those major actors to represent them in those meetings with the policymakers. Like point two though, like for the climate change, right? That's an interesting point. I mean, who like assuming you run a like blockchain-based solution for and it's an amazing tool in the interest of sustainability, like positive impact on the climate and so on. Like you have like now the question, all right, like now you see like it's very regulated, it's highly regulated industry. I mean, like try to enter, like the, grid, quota distribution market in Switzerland. It's, it's multi-billion businesses right here, like that are players in that space. So the question is from the business perspective, if you want to go to talk to the policymakers about blockchain now being introduced into this industry, who are you representing? In whose interests are you talking about? Are those big businesses interested in like blockchain being introduced, or are the end users, like who paying electricity bills are interested? I mean, like, is there a demand from the market side, like from someone who's paying at the end? Is there any interest for you to go there and talk to the regulators? And I think that's like very interesting because there is like a study. I'm not sure how public it is, so like, just like you don't have to believe me, but like I saw it and I cannot verify. I'm not anyhow qualified to verify it. But there is like a study that shows that people who are in general very pro sustainability, like that's like the majority of like European population today. People like to have their coffees from Starbucks from like recycled cups. The same people are very skeptical when they get the electricity bill from Swiss EWZ with like, and it says green on it, but it's more expensive. And the same people saying, well, no, that's from government, that cannot be true. I better still use the, not green electricity because I don't trust this one. And that's like, it's interesting, so probably if you like working on a solution for, for blockchain in the energy space, maybe you first want to educate the customers, the end customers, those people who pay electricity bills, that you're doing something in their interest, so you overcome this skepticism, and then maybe the bigger players following the market's appeal will kind of start investing into the policy work, and then we're gonna like have like some productive discussion with the policymakers, same as like today the L1s are having discussions with the European Parliament and so on.
Good. And I was wondering from that perspective, as you're talking about regulation for the two tax guys we have tonight, whether is there such a thing as too much regulation? Because my feeling is, on the one hand, companies are not starting to do something. It's nice to see you laughing, therefore it's an interesting point probably. So on the one hand, the feeling is companies are not doing something when something is not regulated because their fear is to do something wrong eventually. But on the other hand, and it's particularly relevant in the European Union context, you see now companies are really struggling to manage regulation because there's way too much already from a sustainability perspective. How do you strike like the right balance between too little or no regulation or too much regulation from your perspective?
Well, personal opinion, not in the name of any clients, and so on. Yeah, oh yeah, it's totally too much regulation. I mean, like that's like iconic, right? All the AI startups are in the US. European Union has AI law. I mean, like no startups, but the law, like immediately, right? Because all those people need to do something, right? They need to come to the office in Brussels at 8 a.m. and they need to produce some papers, right? Like Monday till Friday. Again, like personal opinion. And then we need to react, right? Saying like compliance and everything. It's at the same time, right? I mean, like in any of those discussions, there will be like always this neutral phrase that means also nothing. Like, yeah, well, some regulation is important, but where do you draw the line? And you never know. And that's just so happens. And we need to react. I mean, at the end, right? It's just like talking about climate. We already talking about like from the beginning of times, highly regulated industry. I mean, like in Switzerland alone, I mean, like I don't know, there are like, at least like 12 laws regulating, you know, like the grid, power grid distribution. Like I wouldn't even know all the names of those laws. It's just like historically has been like there, you cannot minimize regulation, that will not happen. You're already like entering the industry which is like highly regulated. And now like you coming from the decentralized perspective where people also like kind of all the time talking about regulation. Yeah, I mean like that sounds like a lot of regulation. How to minimize that? I guess like, you know, look, in the classic space, we already have all the laws. I mean, like we've seen, like Switzerland was quite good with the DLT Act, you know, where they said, all right, let's not like override, like let's not create another law, let's just like modify punctually the previous ones. I'm quite sure that in the energy sector is like quite possible. Again, like they take this bunch of laws, you know, like and just like add in each of them a paragraph allowing for, you know, decentralized power distribution. I mean, quite simple, right? Whether someone will come out and oh no, but like and customer protection prices and we need a special law, I guarantee to you there will be like a political voice calling for like another 4 additional laws to regulate only that. But I guess like, yeah, that's the problem of Europe since the last 20 years. It's just like, yeah, we're just producing bureaucracy, unfortunately.
I see. What's your take on this, Stéphanie? You have something to add?
Yeah, I think from a tax perspective, I look at it a bit from a different angle, because if I talk about taxes, or if we talk about taxes, we have to think about incentives and what incentives are driven with taxes. I mean, we see it with the carbon credits, and it can have a huge influence, because the problem is it's sometimes tricky to think it through until the end, but with taxes, the government directly has actually the power to guide action and to make certain things happen, or actually also to, maybe not support certain initiatives. And now, exactly with climate change and decentralized energy, I think we have to be very careful how we introduce taxes and to think about, okay, what incentives are behind it. In parallel, we see these reportings. I mean, I see where we are coming from. We are trying to kind of, guide certain behavior. We see it with tobacco tax, alcohol tax, and so on. I mean, it can be very influential. But at the same time, it's a very tricky thing, because then maybe you didn't think of a second market like with the carbon credits, and then you actually then undermine your initial soul. And I think that's a complexity behind taxes. And then in parallel, we have VAT. VAT where we don't have our tax treaties anyways, and I think that's another little level. We have heard before inflation as tax. I am still thinking about it, that's why. And I think it's a form, actually, you can think of it as a form of an indirect tax, like value-added tax, and I think that's, I see you looking at me, I think it's fine.
Yeah, fair enough. And I also understand the point, with tokenomics, the creation of incentives, whether they're from the tax perspective or not, that's definitely an opportunity.
What we need, however, is we need guidance. And that's the problem we have internationally at the moment, that in most of the countries, we don't actually know how do you qualify these tokens for value-added tax, especially important. We don't know how are they taxed, and so suddenly you have a taxation. Maybe you declared it wrong all these years before, and so on. What we really need is guidance and a practice. And of course, as an advisor, I prefer not to have too much. I love to have room for interpretation, but at the moment we have too much of it, and it's not very helpful, neither for investors nor for the companies.
I see. And as you had a strong reaction on the overregulation, I'm interested to hear your point of view from an economist perspective.
Yes, sure. So we as economists, we don't think that regulation is bad. Regulation is actually needed. Basically, whenever there is markets don't solve the problem, and we have that in the environmental sector. So obviously, if there is no regulation, we would pollute, or companies, and we all pollute the world way more than it is efficient. So regulation is needed, but like what is not good is basically just regulate everything, and especially not in a targeted way. Like in regulation or in economics, it's important that there are general rules and that these rules apply for different technologies, for example. It doesn't make sense to, for example, only regulate Bitcoin but not other financial assets, etc., because what happens then, you distort the markets and there might be unwanted results. So for example, one example is if a government like China, there are other reasons why they've done it, but if for example Bitcoin mining is forbidden in one country, this has an impact on the other countries, because like Bitcoining is decentralized, so what happens is just that miners go to other countries, and if we forbid it in a country where the energy mix is very good, then it could have a negative impact. So, as an economist, from our perspective, it's very important that it's not over-regulated. Regulation is good, but it needs to be like general rules and not specific targets, and not specific technology for each technology specific regulation.
Yeah, interesting one. And then I'm trying to connect as well a bit to the panel from before, and I was thinking, as it happens many times, like with railways, or actually electricity infrastructure, there's a separation between, the infrastructure, the ownership of the infrastructure, which you can define as a public good in a way, and on top of that, building, providing the possibility to private companies to run actually the business model on top of it. I was wondering whether you have some point of view, something to elaborate on this, on division, like similarly to many business models like Airbnb, division between, management of the energy infrastructure and ownership of the energy infrastructure.
I let the economists go first.
Yeah,
now,
sure.
for once.
Okay, so so with many infrastructure, this is the case. The separation basically between the infrastructure layer and the application, so to say, in blockchain. And the reason there is often that, like, the infrastructure layer is often monopolistic, in a sense of it doesn't make sense to have, or it's very costly to have several rail lines of different companies side by side, or several electricity wires side by side. So it's more efficient to have one network. And then, but on top, if there are services on top of these net infrastructures, if this is not separated, then what happens is that the infrastructure owner just leverages its force to the next layer where the services are operated to the applications, and then we have a big monopoly, so which is not good for consumer. So we want to have competition on the service layer. So that's the economic view on this separation, basically. It has also problems, etc., but it makes sense from an economic point of view. And I think here, at least for now, I don't see that issue in blockchain, because the infrastructure layer is not, well, there might also be some subsidies, etc., but like Ethereum is not building applications, decentralized applications, and distorting the competition on the service layer. Up to now they want competition on their service layer.
Yeah. And do you want to add something, or you have your take on this?
Yes, I agree, and I think the energy market especially is very interesting, and it has its own driver. And one point we heard before is really energy is power, and it's growing. We need to keep this in mind, right? And I think what is interesting to see is when I talk with UNICEF about the giga projects, where actually now we are building this foundation layer, and actually to incentivize that this is built up. And I think this is now something where we see where this structure is built from ground up, and we see a new dynamic there, because there we have different players, and actually we need to incentivize them to actually build it. And I think it's then the other question will be at one point also to control it, and how do you make this intersection, right? And you need some kind of control to make sure that you have this competition, and it's also I think a tough comparison, because you have two completely different markets. You have the service markets with its dynamics, and then you have the underlying market. And I'm not sure that it's that easy to compare both of them, because it has some complexity in it. And as I said, energy is power more and more. And I think we will see that especially these two dynamics, that can lead to interesting discussions in the future.
Yeah. Giga from UNICEF is a very interesting project, and as I'm aware of time, and we are somehow separating us from the apero time, I was just willing to go for the last question of what do you think are somehow the biggest low-hanging fruits you see for decentralized energy market that should be taken advantage of from your experience? Whomever wants to start, as you.
Alex, come on, go.
Yes, I can do like example, right? We had like the request 2 weeks ago. So it's quite a known institution. They have like massive government grants to actually do something on the Swiss electricity markets, power markets, so like to work with those excessive electricity which is not being used. And we're talking to them, and they know that we're like tech lawyers and work in the blockchain space. They had no idea like what is blockchain, like never, like apart from there was like Bitcoin, and they heard about this from a newspaper in the evening. It's just parallel universe. I mean, that's not like educating policymakers. That's not even like educating the mass customer. This is like educating like a few big players who have the funds, who even have interest, and because it's all like half government institutions. They're not even like that greedy in terms of profits, at least in Switzerland. That would be like go and talk to them, organize a roundtable, a seminar, and see whether there will be synergies. And there was like one project like a while ago with like they tested this grid distribution. They did like with 37 households, like 37, not 37,000. 37. I would call it rather limited, and it's like the only public project in Switzerland. It was like between blockchain and electricity grids. That's like a very low effort. I mean, for any like major institution in this space, like Powerledger, I mean, the question for me for them: are you guys like B2B? Are you B2C? Or are you just like a non-profit for like to enable all things? That would be like first thing, like the first policy efforts. Like then is the question like. Well, in Switzerland we actually have like this problem less, but like in Germany, people paying half of the rent on top of the rent payment, and with electricity bills and everything, people like really suffering. If there was a real solid enough solution on the markets for like households, like save costs on that, like the whole country would be doing it, right? But like it seems not to be in existence, right? So it's like probably also like we need to wait a little bit and like keep developing the technology, the adoption, the usability, like chain abstraction, that like the L1s like instead of competing with each other, like join the efforts more and more. And then like the more professionalized the industry gets, the more the adoption will happen.
Yeah, Steph?
I think from a tax perspective, it's a bit similar. It's just that you're finally on authority level are accepting that decentralization is actually happening and it's here to stay. To have a look at it and just accept it and deal with it.
Yeah, from an economic point of view, it's not trivial, and that's why I also have like a second thought what to say now. Because I think it's something like you said before, like that it's not only the energy sector which is needed, but also the financial sector. Like as I said in the beginning, like these two worlds. But I think we should just try, basically try in different sections. So let the competition play. and innovation play, and also try maybe there where the adoption is high and where the need is the highest, and this might not only be here but also in other parts of the world.
Yeah, I like it as a concluding thought, you know, giving it a try, you know, a small POC with limited potential consequences, and from there everything gets easier. So thanks a lot for our great panelists.